Welcome to the Joyful Mate podcast. Join your joyful journey mentor, Anthony Harcher, as we explore the path to inner joy and fulfillment. Each episode we dive into the science of happiness, share personal insights, and invite you to be part of this interactive book writing adventure. You'll hear from experts in the field of joy, happiness, and fulfillment who will share their wisdom and experiences. Let's embark on this journey together. Let's make happiness part of your everyday. Welcome on the Joyful Mates podcast. Sol, how are you today?
Good, Anthony. How are you? Good to see you.
So great to see you. And I think I'm just thinking now you're the first neuroscientist to come on the Joyful Mates podcast. So I'm delighted to have you on as a guest.
Well, thank you for having me. It's silly to think of myself as a neuroscientist this early on in my career, but I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So just to bring the listeners up to speed, can you share a bit about you, your background, and maybe a story?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, my name is Sol. I met Anthony when I was interning at Me and My Wellness during my time in Sydney, Australia. I was studying abroad during my undergraduate career in Boston University. I recently graduated this past May with undergraduate degrees in psychology and neuroscience. And right now I'm currently working as a research assistant at a nonprofit that reviews clinical effectiveness and cost effectiveness of drugs hitting the market. And why I kind of got into this space and wanting to kind of focus on neuroscience and psychology really stemmed from the fact that when I was around 14, 15, my dad had a TIA, and that kind of really made me aware of how big a role the brain plays in our life, in the way that we act, in the way that we think, in the way that we're able to live in a really fulfilling manner. And that just made me really want to piece together the puzzle as to what is out there in the brain and what we don't know about it and how I can contribute to this amazing field.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're in this field because, with the time you spent with me, I could see your passion for the subject matter. And so, I'm delighted to have a neuroscientist on the show. And let's get underway with the first question I have for you. And it's, what is happiness to you?
That's such a loaded question. I feel like happiness is one of the scariest emotions to kind of approach, especially in this field. But I think happiness, to me, when I think about it, is just being very fulfilled within yourself and fulfilled with your surroundings. I think it's reaching a state of mind and being in which you're kind of okay with just coasting at where you are, and you're not worried about stressors that may be worrisome to others in a more, stressful environment. So I think happiness is really a state of being. I think it's not as transient as others believe. It's not just an emotion that can come and go. I really think that it's a state that you can kind of achieve after work and, taking time for yourself.
Fantastic. It's the first real, deep thought provoking response I've had. So I love it. I actually really resonate with what you shared there around fulfillment, because I certainly can relate to that in terms of having a previous career in corporate and noticing that I wasn't, as much as I was getting paid well and everything, and enjoyed the travel and seeing the world and enjoyed the work. I was actually enjoying the work I was doing. It was just this little bit of emptiness that I felt within me. And I think the emptiness was really the heart, and the heart was singing about, you love health and wellness, and, you need to get out there and share this with the world. And ever since I took that step, my life's been so much more fulfilled in terms of entering this field and doing what I love every day. So I really love how you've shared that it's, it comes from within, and it's a sense of fulfillment. And so my next question for you is, what brings that fulfillment to you?
Yeah, there's so many things that bring it. And I think what's so, I feel like, beautiful about it is that it's not necessarily that you can kind of pinpoint, okay, this is what brings me happiness, because it can bring me happiness one day, and the next day it might not be the thing that I want to do. For example, I love, to take care of my body, and I love to work out, but, some days that's not what I necessarily need. But I really do think that just exercising my mind, exercising my body is really important. Socializing is very, very important. We kind of saw the negative effects that not socializing has on us during the pandemic. So I feel like after that, I've been able to kind of cherish my time that I spend with my family, my friends, as well as with myself a little bit more. And I think that those really just help me be a lot more happy and a lot more grateful for what I am able to achieve each and every day. And that really allows me to achieve the happiness that I want.
I actually had a vision come to mind when you shared what how you foster happiness and how it can be, there's certain things that bring that transient happiness, such as it could be going to a concert with your friends and it's a great night out, right? And that sort of buzz lasts for a couple of days and a couple of days leading up to it and all that. However, it goes away. The concert's done and finished. And so the concept or the picture I visioned was sort of high and low tides, right? So like in terms of some people may not really know what fulfills them and generally just looking for, I guess, a bit of swell coming in or, a few larger waves coming in, and that's the sort of concerts, and they're constantly trying to fill the low tide with just these things here, there scattered. But what you're sharing is it's how do you maintain that high tide? And so you've got a much higher base of general fulfillment, and you just shared what that is for you. It's like, getting outside and exercising, moving the body, keeping healthy. The relationships are a really important part of that high tide for you. So yeah, I'm just going to play with this concept in my mind as to, because obviously I'm looking for ways to articulate this. Yeah.
No, I think that's a beautiful kind of analogy with the high and low tides. I mean, the most common phrase that is used is like the roller coaster has to come down in order to come up again. So I feel like we're just kind of ingrained with that idea that like, okay, well, for it to be a really high moment, we have to go low sometime, But I really like that idea of, having that high base already. So you have that kind of floor effect and you can't really dip below that.
Yeah. So it's constantly putting in, like, filling, topping up to keep that floor effect. So, like, what keeps that floor effect for me, or the higher tide is certainly like doing this and doing the work that I love, and there's elements of this that are not so fulfilling, and I'm looking for how I can delegate that to someone that finds it fulfilling. So for like my podcasting, obviously there's the whole thing of editing and stuff like that. I enjoy the conversations, but I found someone that loves doing video editing, and they do the video editing. So I think it's really understanding what lights you up, and then if you're doing things that don't light you up, then how can you support someone else that enjoys doing that, and that develops their high tide?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we can all help each other in the long run. I think that's something that really, really does play a big role in feeling happy. Is helping others reach that level. So you're not alone when you're at that high tide. You have people to be with.
Absolutely, and it's why we should strive to be just ourselves, because if we're trying to copy other people, you're not going to have that synergistic effect. I mean, what makes us so special in terms of we're all unique, and we all have different things that fulfill us, and if we can understand each other's, then we can feed each other and support each other.
Absolutely, definitely.
So this next, this next question is certainly a challenging one, in the sense that, like, you read a lot of reports that people are generally unhappy, and particularly in probably the Western world or the more developed world, and we have rising affluence, and we've got plenty to be happy about, but there's general discontentment, and certainly it's seen in the workplace that people unhappy and flows onto their lives. So I was wondering if you had any insights as to what might be some of the drivers about this general dissatisfaction with life.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that can kind of contribute. I mean, I think, like I mentioned before, we just came out of a pandemic. That was definitely a collective trauma. So I think that definitely did impact a lot of, emotional kind of volatility, during this time. But I think something that does come to mind is, I feel like we live in an era of relatability. And what I kind of mean by that is that when you go on, social media, you're actively searching for things that you can kind of relate to. And a lot of times you're going to be searching for things to relate to when you're in a negative situation or kind of in a negative headspace, to kind of ensure yourself that you're not alone in what you're feeling, which might be, most often than not, a negative feeling rather than a positive one. I think that especially with the whole parasocial relationships that now exist, with a lot of social media presence that's going on online, I feel like that really does play a role in transmitting of false negativity to the audience. And I don't believe that it's anyone's kind of purpose of creating content, but if you're constantly consuming content that is negative and talking about, unhappiness or an unhappy moment in your life, and you're relating to that, you're kind of reverting back to that space where you were unhappy, and you're not allowing yourself to kind of move forward, and you're kind of stuck in that fixed space. And I feel like that really does play a key role in why there's so many, people out there that are unhappy. And if you ask them, what is happiness to you, that they might not be able to answer that. But if you ask them, what is unhappiness to you, what is depression like to you, they will, because they consume that sort of, content more so than the positive one. So at the end of the day, we're very much a monkey see, monkey do kind of animal. So I really do think that we kind of take energies from each other, and unfortunately a lot of that is negative.
Yeah, and you've really hit on a key point here. It's that, like, the news, like the news feed is ultimately negative, right? It wants to grab attention, and the best way to grab attention is drama, right? So
yep.
There's that triangle. There's the villain, the victim, and then the hero, and they just feed that triangle to create the drama effect and to grab attention, grab eyeballs, and to maintain that attention, to take them along and read the stories and look at all and consume all the ads, right? So so I totally agree. And then that drama just plays out, and people commenting on it or getting tied up and drawn into it. And as you said, it just feeds this cycle that they then see the world as just, it's bad, it's a bad place to be, it's so, everything's wrong about it, we've got climate change, we've got wars in the world, we've got all these things going on. And like you mentioned, social media, and which has made us, from a global sense, way more connected than ever before. Because I'm thinking, in the past, these wars could have happened on the other side of the world, and you wouldn't hear about them, right?
Yeah, definitely. And they did. That's the simple fact, is that they did happen. Yeah. And you weren't consuming it. You wouldn't open up your phone and immediately be, approach with it. And there's a good and bad part, because you on the one side you're maintaining yourself informed, but on the other side it's really hard to kind of escape and disconnect from that at times. So kind of going back to that high and low tide, I feel like you're becoming more desensitized to this sort of like negative just content and overall emotion. So you're more like at a lower tide, like your low tide is higher than it should be. So you can kind of go lower than what should be the lowest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I'm just thinking, like I've seen this diagram of Europe, and over the centuries, you can go back from when we started, they've always been at war, right? In terms of the land, who owns what land, and they're still at war today, right? So Europe's constantly been changing its boundaries. And like, I saw this thing on LinkedIn, and it was showing the boundary changes over time, and it's just constantly morphing. And at the moment, Russia and the Ukraine are fighting over boundaries, and so like it's not as if it never existed and it's unusual. This type of fighting in the world has always happened. So it's very much that thing that it's more in front of us these days, and we actually see graphic images that really, as you mentioned, sort of that traumatic sort of impact on us. And I think the difficult thing is that it's something really out of our control that we're focusing on. And when we focus, whatever we focus on, it expands. And so if we're focusing on things that are out of our control, we feel more out of control, and we feel more helpless and hopeless. And as you know, hopelessness and helplessness, results in depression long term if you feel that way over, and so I ultimately look at things as, what can I do about it? If there's something I can do about it, then I'll do something. And, that makes me feel like I'm contributing and making a difference. Like on the climate change piece, I'm constantly doing what I can do to support the environment. And that's within my control. But for me and the government, I have a very small influence on the government. I have one vote, right? So for me, it's what can I do? And I focus on what I do and make sure that I'm constantly improving in terms of having, I guess, a minimal or a coexistence, a good coexistence, a good relationship with the environment.
Right. No, and it's really important for that.
So in terms of, well, you just mentioned there's that, we don't want to make our low tide any lower. And so I refer to these as happiness thieves, what takes happiness away. So what are some of the thieves of happiness, or are there any misconceptions you've had around happiness that you realize that are totally untrue and sort of led you astray?
It's a great question. I feel like introspectively, I really can't, there's a lot of things that can kind of strip one's happiness away from each other. It can be, people who may not have you in their best interests. It can be, moments that, you experience loss, and that's kind of what comes to mind. But I think for me, a general misunderstanding that I feel like I had of happiness before I kind of like sat down and worked through it a little bit more is that I love the phrase that happiness comes from within. And to an extent, I 100% agree. But I also think that a lot of that can come from, external sources as well. I think that, my family and friends, or just any support system that have come in my life, have really aided me in achieving that. And I think a lot of people get stuck with well, I can't be happy because I'm not happy. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that feels like. I don't know how to achieve it. I don't know how to search that within myself. And I think that that's a myth, that you have to start from within. It's okay if you have to start from, taking up a new hobby, maybe joining, a fitness class, or joining like an art class or something. I think that is a really good first step to take. And I think a lot of people immediately stressed out over the fact that it has to be internal for it to be an internal state of mind and being. But I think, really allowing yourself to kind of see who's there for you to lean on is really important. And I think that that's generally not misunderstood per se, but overlooked for sure in happiness. And
having that support network is really important, because as you said, certain things will happen. Everyone experiences loss in life, right? So that's
absolutely,
that's going to happen, and during those times you need that support network to just to, I guess, keep you going, and keep you moving forward. And so I agree with you. It's certainly making sure but to build that support network requires time and energy as well. So you need to invest time into relationships. And just on your point, because you mentioned the social media thing. And one of the social media things that it does, you say people go on there to relate, is at the same time they're wanting to look to relate, they're also comparing. So they're seeing images of highlight reels of someone somewhere in the world having a great time, and they're back at work, and it's life's so hard and difficult. And like, I'm thinking way back before social media, we wouldn't have had these constant comparisons essentially all day. Whenever you check in with social media, you're comparing, you're trying to relate, but you end up comparing. And I just wonder how much of that it's having an impact on people understanding happiness, because what they're seeing is other people happy doing what lights them up, but they're thinking, maybe that's what I need to do in order to feel happy. They do that, and then they think, I don't feel lit up, because they're a totally different person, right? They've got different things that light them up. So do you think that is somewhat contributing to people not understanding what makes them happy, because they're comparing happiness to what makes other people happy?
Absolutely. I think, everyone knows the phrase, comparison is a thief of joy. I really do stand by that. And I think, comparison is just so brutal nowadays, especially with social media, especially with even like platforms like LinkedIn, where, there's a constant share of like achievements and what someone else is doing. And it's kind of a mentality of being in a race. If you see someone reach the finish line, you think, oh, well, I'm going to feel that ecstatic when I reach it. But maybe this isn't the race for you. Maybe this isn't what your end goal should be for you to feel that fulfillment. So I completely agree with you. I think comparison really has not allowed people to take the time to really say, okay, yes, person A is doing this. This is making them feel happy. They're currently living it up in Greece. But me, I know that I would feel happy if I take the time to save my money to invest in a home for my family in the future. People have different goals. And I feel like if you take the time to kind of allow yourself to develop an independent mentality away from those parasocial relationships, away from that parasocial stress, then yeah, I think people would have a lot more, a bit more cohesive understanding as to what happiness means to them, not just in general.
Yeah, you reminded me of this Stephen Covey book that you don't want to be climbing up the ladder that's against the wrong wall. So make sure you're climbing or pursuing something that takes you to where you want to go, as opposed to someone else's wall.
Yeah.
And you get to the heights and you're thinking, oh, this is not the wall I wanted.
Yeah, and then you have to, go climb your ladder on that wall, and you are less energized because you already spent it on someone else's end goal. Yeah.
True, very true, actually. And it can create that sense of, you feel more disillusioned in the sense that, well, I accomplished what they accomplished, but I'm still unfulfilled, and you're thinking, maybe there's nothing that's going to bring me fulfillment in this life, like it can really, particularly if you've done that a number of times, like you're constantly chasing other people's goals. My next one for you is there something about happiness that still remains a bit elusive that you'd like to know, that is misunderstood or unknown, or I'm just wondering if you've got anything curious about happiness that you'd like to know more about.
I mean, I would love to know more about happiness. I think everyone should want to know more about it. There's so much more. I feel like as we were having this conversation, I feel like happiness is not and that could be completely wrong, but I feel as though happiness isn't as thoroughly studied as the other emotions are. I feel like there's a lot more content about, well, why might I be depressed, and what anxiety means, and what, being stressed means, and what that may look like. So I think I would love to know why people are hesitant to talk about it more openly. I think there's kind of you kind of mentioned previously that, this generation is a lot more open to talking about mental health, which is wonderful, but a huge aspect of mental health is happiness. I mean, that is just such a fundamental emotion. And I would love to know why there is still a stigma around that, and why we're scared to kind of share what makes us happy, to kind of get ideas and all of that.
Yeah, you just sort of ignited something in me. I'm thinking we're more energized to avoid the pain than pursue the pleasure, right? So I'm thinking we want to get away from the illness, which means that we're focused on the illness. What we focus on expands, whereas we're not as much driven to focus on what we want. It's more, trying to avoid the pain, and we'll do anything to avoid the pain, and I guess temporarily seek pleasure every now and then. And I think so. One thing that comes up for me, particularly with Gen Z, is we're a lot more aware of mental health. We're a lot more talking about it, and certainly Gen Z's been brought up to talk about how they feel and to share it openly, and so that people, can help you and help you through things. And I'm thinking maybe because the focus is on mental illness, in essence, we're focused on anxiety, we're focused on depression, we're focused on ADHD, we're focused on all these sort of mental illnesses. We're thinking, well, I don't want that. But then when I look up, when I go onto TikTok, I see someone, an expert, sharing what are the symptoms or the signs to look out for, or what are the questions that you've got to ask yourself in order to see if you're ADHD. And for me, I could diagnose myself with ADHD certainly when I'm doing things that aren't fulfilling, right? So if I'm doing video editing, I'm going to have ADHD. There's no doubt about it. I just don't like sitting down in front of a computer editing files, right? It drives me nuts. Whereas I know the person that does the video editing for me, he sits down and he's got 100% focus and nothing can distract him. Whereas I'm the 100% opposite, right? I've got 100% distraction and I can't do it. So that's what I consider, particularly in Australia, we've got this funding that you can get when you're diagnosed with certain mental illnesses now. And again, that's an attraction, isn't it? Well, if I can pass the questionnaire, I get government support. I'm not saying that people are misusing it like that, but it can drive the wrong behavior. And I know how to answer that questionnaire in order to be diagnosed with ADHD. It's quite easily, right?
Yeah.
Very similar to depression, right? And I think the thing is that, like, we can look at the questionnaire around depression or anxiety, and there's times in our life where we will be low, and there's times in our life where we're anxious, right? That's part of life.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that makes it difficult is once we label ourselves, we attach ourselves to that label, and then that brings us some benefits being attached to that label. It may bring certain amount of support around us or attention around us. And so then we get attached to feeling that and thinking, well, if I distance myself from this label and say I'm no longer depressed, then will I lose this support network? Will I lose this funding? And so there's an element today where we are, I think, very focused on the illness, and as opposed to, as you said, we don't look at what we really want, and we're not looking at how we can get what we want. And I think if we change that, the way in which we view mental health, maybe, and focus more on what we want as opposed to what we want to avoid.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially with the whole labeling thing, I mean, just being able to kind of say, like, I have depression, that makes sense. That's why I can never feel this way, so I can never feel this way. I think it's really easy to just say, like, oh, it's one and be all. But even, like, I mean, I'm diagnosed with depression, and I'm still able to sit on here and be like, I am a happy person, because it's not the end all be all. I mean, there's a whole neurobiology behind it. I mean, you studied it, and I know from my, beginner studies of it, it's not the end all be all. And I feel like people are really just scrambling to kind of make sense as to why. But at the end of the day, emotions are really complex. And like you say, they can change from not only one day to the next, but 1 minute to the next. I mean, that's how it is, and that's how it should be.
And I think the other challenge is we have been brought up in terms of this, chasing, like wanting to get out of the state we're in quickly, as opposed to putting the work in and finding a sustainable way out. Like, so it's sort of, what's the quick fix? And I think that's also led us astray in terms of, like, a quick fix could be a drug, for example. But is that sustainable? Is that really addressing the underlying issue? And I think because of this impulsive gratification or, impulsiveness to get better quickly, as opposed to, it takes a lot of work to understand the underlying root cause and then start changing habits to address it, and putting in practices, or, or developing support networks, or, so I think that's the other thing, is we're just looking for those quick fixes as opposed to something that's more sustainable. As you know, with quick fixes, they can result in addictions, and then you've got another problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because that dopamine system, it gets all, rewired and reconfigured to kind of work on that addiction cycle. And and then that's a whole nother mountain to cross over. Absolutely. But I feel like the whole idea of delayed gratification really scares a lot of people. And I get it, because we live, like we said before, you're able to be connected across the globe in an instant. I mean, I'm sat here in the States, here in Australia, but with social media, we're able to be connected like that. And so we think that everything should be at the touch of a screen, a click of our fingers. But unfortunately, some things should take time in order for it to stay longer.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, the access to information once upon a time was that you ended up, had to go to the library, make time to go to the library, find the book, then go through the book. You got to be like it. But now it's...
different world.
Different world. Yeah. And like transportation, like to get from one side of the world to the other, you used to have to jump on a ship. It used to take months.
Yes, absolutely. And now, the second a flight gets delayed, people are scream crying and all of that. Yeah.
So, and I think, like, technology makes us more impulsive. It's like, I find if I've got a technology issue, I just, why won't it, why does this, and you get really impatient with it, and then you sort of lose track. Like, then you think, it's hopeless or whatever, but most of the time it's good, right? But we just develop an unrealistic expectation, thinking that things should remain not problematic forever. Like, it's just unreal. And then once we have a problem, we then focus on the problem and then just think it's, why me? But I think, so that unrealistic expectations is another thing that really, feeds us around taking away happiness, is that, we might have an expectation on life that we should always be happy every moment of every day, whereas that's not real. As you know, you don't know what's ahead.
No
one can predict it. It's sort of can only live by moment to moment. So thank you for invoking a lot of thought-provoking conversation in today's episode of Joyful Mates. I'm really glad you've come along and provided such great insight, Sol. How can the listeners best connect with you?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Anthony. This was such a wonderful discussion. And if you're interested in reaching out to me, you can reach me by my LinkedIn. I'm sure, Anthony, you can kind of link it whenever you share this episode, but feel free to send me a message. I'm open to communicating with anyone who has any questions or just wants to chat.
Awesome. Yeah, so I thoroughly recommend you to connect with Sol and get some terrific insights in terms of what she is researching and what she does, and go along a journey of exploring the neuroscience of the brain and getting more aware. I think, with awareness, we can then address, do actions to address things. If we don't have the awareness, then we just keep doing the same old things. So
exactly.
Yeah, so if we want to, discover or create more happiness in our lives or foster more happiness, then we want to obviously realize that we don't have it, or it's we don't have the high tide, we've got the low tide, and to connect with people that can help bring about and foster that happiness with you. If there's others out there that would benefit from this insightful discussion with Sol, please share the episode. I'd love you to get it out as far as wide, because it's all about helping others help find more fulfillment in their lives. So thank you, listeners, and thank you once again, Sol.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, everybody, for listening.